We say hello and welcome. Good morning. Welcome to a special broadcast from our live studios here in Lagos, Nigeria. Remember, we are Africa First, and it's only right that we do justice by bringing to you the latest stories and not forgetting to take a look at countries, especially from the African continent, who are indeed celebrating what is worth celebrating. I'm Joe Hanson. Welcome to Lesotho at 56. I'm not alone. Of course, I've got Blessings Mosugu. Good to have you here, Blessings.
Good to be here. Good morning, Africa. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and today we celebrate the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, the only country that was twinned with Wales, and the only country that has the highest and the lowest point in the world. Now, Lesotho is a beautiful country, Joe Hanson. I mean, they have amazing features, amazing things, and seeing how they are surrounded by South Africa, that doesn't limit them. It is really a beautiful country, seeing how they have a constitutional monarchy as well as, you know, a freedom of democracy. And I just see the beautiful and unique features of that country. And, you know, Lesotho is one country I'd love to visit.
No doubt. And we're going to take you there, just in case you are thinking, what is happening in Lesotho? Well, right now, the country is indeed in celebratory mode. And there's only one thing, not for us to just take a look at its independence. We're also going to take a look at the other aspects that concerns Lesotho. For instance, the political atmosphere, not forgetting the economy, as well as Lesotho as a country, and not forgetting bilateral agreements, ties, you name it. We are going to do justice to all of that for 2 hours or thereabout. It's going to be a very interesting ride, not a bumpy one, but very interesting because we do also have guests who will be joining us to talk about all of this. In the meantime, Blessings, you say you want to go to Lesotho, but I can tell you this, that I'm already making plans to go there myself.
Oh, amazing. You take me along with you. All right, sit back and relax. It's going to be an amazing 2 hours of giving you more information about Lesotho's politics, their economies, and many more. Don't go anywhere.
And welcome. Thank you so much once again for joining us for this special broadcast. We're looking at Lesotho at 56, a country that gained its independence from British colony. Aside that, it's been tipsy-turvy from one political party to another, but of course a dominant ruling political party is one we're going to look at in the course of our discussion for 2 hours. We'll also take a look at the fact that there are indeed things that we can learn from. And in the midst of where you have other African countries indeed going through a lot of recession, not forgetting to turmoil from the political angle, well, will Lesotho actually embrace and stand up and become different? There's so many to talk about, but without further ado, we will go straight into the discussion. We do have 2 wonderful, respected and amazing guests who are joining us now live. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the head of Department Public and Environmental Law, Department of the University of Limpopo, and the consultant for the National Reforms Authority, NRA, during the drafting of the Omnibus Bill. Without further ado, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us, Hoolo Nyane.
Thank you. Good morning to you both and to our viewers.
Good morning to you, Hoolo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure.
All right. All right, let's also welcome who's here with us to discuss a full length of this first hour. We do have Director of the Economic Modeling Academy, Research Associate at Oxford University, and South Africa's former Statistician General, Dr. Pali Lehohla. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. By the way, Lesotho is my country.
Oh.
Born and bred there.
How do you say good morning in Lesotho, by the way?
Pardon?
How do you say good morning? How do you greet?
It's a long answer. The king of the Basotho was the founder of the Basotho nation was a great lover of peace. King Mosugu the first.
Okay.
Said
I don't think you got my question. My question is, how do you greet? How do you say
what
good
is
morning?
Yes, I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Not a short answer. And he said his sister is peace. And the Basotho, their greetings is about peace. Peace be with you.
Oh.
Which is Hoto. Hoto is peace.
Peace.
So every Mosotho will say Hoso, which means peace.
So whenever I come across the Basotho people, I can easily just say peace?
Yes. So that's the ethos. It starts there from the king when he said his sister is peace.
Oh, I see. I see.
But he enjoyed very little peace through his reign because there were the Difatani around the time, but he navigated that space, imbuing and living the ethos of peace. And the greeting therefore is peace. When you go into Lesotho, it's a come in peace. And that's what you see at the border.
All right.
Yes, yeah.
I see that.
You know, Joe Hanson, this reminds me that there are so many reasons behind cultures and traditions. I mean, look at the long explanation to just one simple greeting. But anyways, since I can't pronounce it, peace be unto you. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's go straight into it. Now, I'm going to ask the first question as it pertains to politics. We know that the election is scheduled for October the 7th, and we have seen a lot of ups and downs when it comes to the political aspect of Lesotho. And one thing the Basotho people have been looking forward to is the reform of the country. And now we hear that some few days ago, the reform was now, moved or postponed, and we don't know what the criteria are now. And the Basotho people are now looking towards the people's propaganda as to what they will do when they get into power. So what would you have to say about that? What is it that the people of Basotho can actually hold on to when it comes to the next level of politics in Lesotho?
Should I answer that or my colleague?
You can go ahead,
please.
Or you are saying we should take the questions as they come?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's a very complex issue that you are raising because Lesotho since 1966 has not really enjoyed a lot of peace. The first election was annulled by the then Basotho National Party, which said the elections, they declared a state of emergency. And I think that started a very problematic period in Lesotho. Now, fast forward into 66 parties contesting elections over a population of 2 million, you actually have to ask yourself, what are the ideological differences or economic policy differences that split into 66 manifestos? Would there be a difference in those manifestos? I doubt. So one expects a more chaotic kind of a post-election period in Lesotho because there cannot be 66 differences in a population of 2 million. That population is very much related. Everyone in Lesotho is related to someone in Lesotho naturally, but there isn't a space where people are so experiencing a lot of intermarriages, relationships, and this is defined by the cow, because the cow is an ornament of dowry, and we are all tied by the cow. That's the saying. We're all tied by the cow. Our blankets are the cow, and everything is about the cow. And it means that the country is so interrelated, that the 66 parties or 66 ideologies or 66 formations defy deeply this very related by blood society.
All right, Dr. Padi, and of course, Dr. Padi, beg your pardon, and Nyane, please, I'd like to beg your pardon. Just give us a few minutes because of the impact that this particular special broadcast has, especially on our viewers, and the fact that we do have viewers joining us from different parts of Africa, north, east, south, name it. We'd like to play a package that gives a clear indication of what to expect, especially as Lesotho celebrates this anniversary. So let's take some time out, watch this package beautifully put together by our in-house reporter, Bernard Akide, which encompasses everything that we are looking at and we'll be talking extensively about in this special broadcast. When we come back, we'll go to you straight off, Hoolo. So please do us a favor, just stay with us.
Officially known as the Kingdom of Lesotho, Lesotho is a country landlocked as an enclave in South Africa. It is situated in the Maloti Mountains and contains the highest mountains in southern Africa. It has an area of over 30,000 square kilometers and has a population of just about 2 million. It was previously the British Crown colony of Basutoland, which declared independence from the United Kingdom on the 4th October 1966. It is a fully sovereign state and is a member of the United Nations UN, the Commonwealth of Nations, the African Union, and the Southern African Development Community. The name Lesotho roughly translates to Land of the Sotho. The Lesotho government is a parliamentary or constitutional monarchy. The Prime Minister, Moeketsi Majoro, is the head of government and has executive authority. The King of Lesotho, Letsi III, is the head of state and serves a largely ceremonial function. He no longer possesses any executive authority and is prohibited from actively participating in political initiatives. The All Basotho Convention, ABC, leads a coalition government in the National Assembly, the lower house of parliament. The upper house of parliament, the Senate, is composed of 22 principal chiefs whose membership is hereditary, and 11 appointees of the king acting on the advice of the Prime Minister. The Constitution protects some civil liberties, including freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of the press, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of religion. Lesotho was ranked 12th out of 48 sub-Saharan countries in the 2008 Ibrahim Index of African Governance. The Basotho National Party, BNP, ruled from 1966 until January 1970. What later ensued was a de facto government led by Leabo Jonathan until 1986, when the military coup forced it out of office. In January 1970, the ruling BNP lost the first post-independence general election to the Basotho Congress Party's BCP. Prime Minister Jonathan refused to cede power to the BCP, instead declaring himself Prime Minister and imprisoning the BCP leadership. BCP began a rebellion and then received training in Libya for its Lesotho Liberation Army, LLA, under the pretense of being Azanian People's Liberation Army soldiers of the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC. The Transitional Military Council that came into power granted executive power to King Mosugu II, who was until then ceremonial monarch. In 1987, the king was forced into exile. His son was installed as King Letsi III in his place. The chairman of the military junta, Major General Justin Metsing Lekanya, was ousted in 1991 and replaced by Major General Elisa Fiswana Ramaima, who handed over power to a democratically elected government of the BCP in 1993. In August 1994, Letsi III staged a military-backed coup that deposed the BCP government after the BCP government refused to reinstate his father. After protracted negotiations, the BCP government was reinstated and Letsi III ascended the throne again when his father died at the age of 57. In 1997, the ruling BCP split over leadership dispute. Prime Minister Ntsu Mokele formed a new party, the Lesotho Congress of Democracy, LCD, and was followed by a majority of members of parliament, which enabled him to form a new government. Pakalitha Mosisili succeeded Mokele as party leader, and LCD won the general elections in 1998. Opposition protests intensified, culminating in a demonstration outside the Royal Palace in August 1998. An interim political authority, IPA, charged with reviewing the electoral structure in the country, was created in December 1998. IPA devised a proportional electoral system to ensure that the opposition would be represented in the National Assembly. On 30th August 2014, an alleged abortive military coup took place, forcing the Prime Minister, Thomas Thabane, to flee to South Africa for 3 days. On 19th May 2020, Thomas Thabane formally stepped down as Prime Minister of Lesotho following months of pressure after he was named as a suspect in the murder of his ex-wife. Maoketsi Majoro, the economist and former Minister of Development Planning, was elected as Thomas Tabane's successor.
And there you have it. That package has been indeed played out, and I'm sure, Hoolo, you followed carefully. But let's start off with our next question. What does 56 years mean indeed for Lesotho?
Thank you. Perhaps I must acknowledge that your package has been very helpful because it has tried to sketch briefly in a manner that we would not be able to do in this conversation. Perhaps we can only summarize some of the key issues that your package has given us.
Hello.
The main one is that as you look at the history of this country, you'll realize that it is a history that is very checkered, mainly dogged by political instability, characterized by coups and all manner of indications of political instability. And you will see that the positive part about it is that despite all these challenges, this beautiful country has always been committed to democracy, to rights, to constitutionalism. Although its history has not been that smooth because you have constitutional breakdowns, you have sit-ins in parliament, and the most important period that you sketch out in our chronicle there is the period between 1993 up to now. Because remember, in 1993 was when the country returned to electoral politics and returned to a stabler constitutional democracy. So that period is very, very important in the history of this country because although there have been coups even in that period, but there has been a much more improved determination. Because you see, you are saying the monarch at some point in 1994 staged a palace coup. Immediately, the country returned to civilian rule after a very short period of time because there has been commitment to democracy, to elections, to rule of law. However, we should indicate that as the country celebrates independence today, this political instability that has characterized its entire history, not only from 1993, but also even from 1966, has hugely undermined its traction on the economy. As an enclave economy that is entirely surrounded by South Africa, the country had to be extremely creative about how it manages its economy, and that would need stability in the governance, in the management of public affairs. And unfortunately, that is part that has suffered profusely in the entire history. So I think as the country celebrates independence today, we may be able to say, yes, unlike other countries, there has been a determination and commitment to democracy, to electoral politics, and to constitutional democracy. That commitment is immediately discernible from the history of this country. However, the country has not really done well economically. That is why we see its relationship with South Africa, its only neighbor, is not as the citizens would want it because the economy is really not performing well.
Okay, thank you for that, Hoolo. Now, since we're still talking about the politics and the history of the economy of a country, let me just bring in Dr. Paddy now. There have been reports and deductions that Lesotho did not have so much problems. They had little to no problems until 2012 when the coalition government began. And that was when most of their problems started. So I want you to help us, as I say, ascertain the veracity of that claim. Is it true that Lesotho did not have any problems and the problems started when the coalition government started, or they were just underlying problems that just came to the forefront when that started?
Well, I think this is not a matter unique to Lesotho. of forming coalitions in an electoral system that is allowed and is permissible. Probably the coalitions might have precipitated a situation that was yet to happen and undesirable as it was. Yes, the coalitions have formed and the parties have sliced themselves up into 1, 2, 3, up to now, where we have 66 parties. As my co-panelist here said, that the economy is not doing that well. And in large part, I think there is pressure on the economics of Lesotho. From time immemorial, when the mining industry in South Africa started, most of the time the Basotho men would come and work on the mines of South Africa. Up to 160,000 able-bodied men will be working in the mines in South Africa, and probably a spattering of women would work in here. So that is a significant number in a country that was about 1 million people, whereby 20 or so percent or 16% of its population, or if you were to think about the labor force, half its labor force was working in South Africa. With the closure of the mines in South Africa and mechanization, both of the mines and agriculture, Lesotho has had pressure points economically, and they are enclosed in that country, which is beautiful, as small as it is, and the economy is not functioning that well for that reason. By the way, I dare to say that Lesotho extended and was the whole Free State, that is now South Africa, was Lesotho. But through the collusion of maize and gold, that is the British and the Africans, they robbed Lesotho of the Free State. And perhaps that's the discussion that should be on the table going forward.
All right.
And not coalition politics. Coalition politics is a non-factor here. It may well be that the Basotho must be united in saying, how do we undertake and understand the context of Lesotho in the independence of South Africa? And how do we think about regional integration differently? That really is the key going forward. Now that we are 56 years old, we should say, in the next 56 years, how will that regional integration function? Liberating Lesotho into parts of the Free State, or whatever arrangement can be made. But that arrangement has to be made because the theft of land from Lesotho is unjust.
I can imagine. I mean, these points you've made are indeed clear. But let's do this. Let's take a look at the political history as we run down to what's going to take place this Friday. I mean, this Friday is very monumental, especially to the powers and most importantly to the ruling and governorship of Lesotho. Let's take a look at the 5 prime ministers as you've had for the past years. I mean, since 2017, since you had the ABC, 5 prime ministers, and we will not be complete if we do not mention one of them, which is Thomas Thabane. Now, Thomas Thabane was one person who was pushing so much to ensure that things were done quite differently. And in between that, we also saw that there were calls for a complete reform, 2 bills to be passed to avoid political volatility, especially in Lesotho. But these bills we hear definitely were rejected. Now, we are having an elections, especially October 7th, which is this Friday. How certain are you? Let me go first to Hoolo. How certain are the people of Lesotho that this will not erupt in any disagreements, violence, as we've seen sometimes?
Thank you so much. Perhaps let me put a little bit of some context here. Perhaps to weigh in on the question you posed to us earlier about coalitions, that when the country transited into coalition politics in 2012, it was not only a transition from a single party government into coalition, but also a transition from a one-party dominated political system. It's not only because this was the transition from the prime minister that had ruled since 1998, Prime Minister Mosugu, and then transiting into the era of coalitions, which was ushered in by Prime Minister Taban. So it was a monumental transition. But as Dr. Lehohla rightly indicates, the structural challenges confronting the design of government, the design of the country, have always been there. Remember, this country is governed on the basis of the constitution that was adopted in 1993 when the country returned into electoral politics after a long haul in personal and military dictatorship. So that constitution was really not a very good constitution, and it has always been like that. And its own problems and systematic problems underlying it, the thoroughgoing powers of the prime minister going into the judiciary, into parliament, into security agencies, into the civil service, and even into all other aspects of public management in Lesotho. That power has always been unchecked, and that power has caused immense problems in the design. So when the country transited into the coalition era in 2012, those problems have always been there, even prior to 2012. So the coalitions, because of their nature as fragile system of government, only laid bare what has always been there in the design, that this design has challenges. That is why immediately after 2012, there was an increase in the talk about reforming this system, because this system has its own challenges. Now, coming to your question straight away of what is it that people should expect this time around? Should people expect it to be business as usual, that it will still be instability after election as we've always seen it? Your guess on this one is as good as mine, because what we have always tried to do in this period spanning 2012 up to now, we have been as a country in the process of trying to put in place reforms. It was a shock and dismay this month when that process that has spent over 10 years collapsed, all in the eyes of everyone, when government could not manage that process, and ultimately it collapsed on the altar of the courts saying the process was not procedurally managed, and the parliament that finally passed it was not constitutionally recalled from dissolution, and the entire process collapsed. So what it all means is that this election that we are headed to now is going to be an election that will be held on the basis of old rules and constitutional framework. And as they say, history is always the best predictor of what will happen in future. Our post-election history has never been a very good one as a country. And the idea of putting in place reforms was to try to arrest that perennial problem that has dogged the country. But now the reforms have collapsed. The country is approaching this election on the basis of old legal framework, and it is not clear whether this election will not be just another election like all others, where we have seen instability after election, because there is no change that we have with this particular election. It is an election like any other. Reforms that were intended to make them a special and unique election have collapsed, and we can only hope that we will see stability after election.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Hoolo. Now, Dr. Padi, let's bring you back to the recent day politics. Now, there have been formations of different new political parties over the years, and we've seen such formations for a long time. And I wouldn't mention any party in particular, but it is believed that these new political parties are most likely to change the political landscape of Lesotho. How true would we say that is?
Well, as I said, that there are 66 parties. And in all probability, all these parties are talking about same things. But why are they so many if they are talking about same things? And politics being matters of times being self-interest, new parties may emerge with new promises. And what one has to see is what does the manifesto actually say, and how does it intend to resolve the problems of Lesotho, of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, which is and the social disturbances that are emerging out of its own history of being a migrant, labor-sending country, and on the mines, a number of things happening, and a particular form of a crime that has elevated Lesotho to be the murder city of the world. So all these things are things that are consequences of a major problem in Lesotho of economics. So that, I think, is the main challenge. The new political parties, yes, they are there. Perhaps they come with new ideas. One is to see how they will execute those ideas that they might be bringing.
All right, since...
but as you hear from my tone, I am rather skeptical until we really look at how much of Lesotho, for instance, at the moment, Lesotho should be having about 2.8 million people in the country, but it has only 2 million. About 800,000 of those, like myself, are now in South Africa. So the real question is, how do we allow free movement of labor, of knowledge across Lesotho and South Africa, goods and services, with a clearer dispensation? I think that, for me, if political parties were discussing around that issue, many make a mistake and say, why is Lesotho not a 10th province? No, it can't. It was never conquered. And that's what Mosugu preserved for us as the Basotho. But a different discussion can be had, whereby a regional arrangement is made between South Africa and Lesotho. And that is what I think our politics may well be about, the political economy of these two countries.
All right, let me go back to you, Hoolo, and maybe later on, Doctor, you might want to also chip in your thoughts on this next question of mine. It's got to do with the fact that there seems to be an internal wrangle in the ABC. Of course, we've heard cases where even there seemed to be a replacement for Prime Minister Majoro as well. But let's look at the fact that Africa as a whole is equally faced with the latest situation of coups. We've seen one take place not quite long ago, of course, in Burkina Faso. We've seen Guinea and the likes. We can name them. But since your independence from Britain, you've had four coups take place. Are there any fears that now that you have an internal crisis with the ruling party, the ABC, there might be something similar that could take place, because it seems to be a smell in the air?
Thank you. Perhaps let's do this. The All Basotho Convention, that is the party that was formed by former Prime Minister Thabane as way back as 2006, has been in a conflict of its own, and it has not seen stability for some time. And you remember that now the Prime Minister that is in power now, Prime Minister Majoro, is from the ABC, but he is not the leader of the ABC. ABC now, after Thabane, has a new leader. And we saw something very strange at the beginning of this year when ABC told us that it's pulling itself away from government, despite the fact that the Prime Minister remains the member of ABC and from ABC. But when we talk about ABC as a factor now, because it has taken a very weird posture in this current government, because initially it was thought that this government is led by ABC and the Prime Minister will be from ABC. Of course, in terms of the rules and intricacies of the constitutional design in Lesotho, it is now the case that the leader of the ABC, who is extremely aggrieved with the fact that he is not the Prime Minister, and the party broadly is aggrieved that they are not necessarily leading government with their leader, they decided that they are pulling out of government. So we have a very strange situation where Majoro is a member of ABC, but ABC has pronounced that it is pulling out of government. And of course, the ABC that announced that it's pulling out of government, which is led by Kabi now, appears to be somewhat stable because it is clear who is the leader, who is the executive committee, unlike in the past couple of years where there was a lot of contestation even of the executive committee, who is the executive committee, who is the deputy leader. And of course, Thabane, as the outgoing leader, has always had a hand in that instability that followed after his era, because he has always denied when the party democratically elects people and someone who appears to be on course to succeed him. So he has always been interested in who is going to succeed him. But all that history notwithstanding, it can be said that now ABC, which we can technically say it is ABC that is not necessarily in government, is headed for this election as a kind of a unit under Kabi, although it remains to be seen whether it will still be, and indications are that it has been affected by the factions that it has experienced and the formations of new political parties. So it remains to be seen whether the All Basotho Convention, which has been the party with most voters in the past election in Lesotho, whether it will still return as a political party with the best majority. Because otherwise, in terms of whether we can have a political party with an outright majority, it appears to be clear by now that the country is trapped in the coalition arrangement. What we should be asking ourselves is whether which political party will come back with the best majority. And the question now is whether ABC is still a political party with best majority because of what it experienced in the past.
Okay, Hoolo, let me follow up on that. Since we're still talking about the elections, let's focus a little more on the security aspect. Now, we know that Lesotho as a whole is not an uber-violent country, but nevertheless, we've heard of cases where the security forces, for example, are under accusations almost all the time that they, dish out violence and sometimes human rights violations as well. And when it comes to, political settings and elections like this one that is forthcoming, we hear of certain violations, we hear of political unrest a lot of times. So what do you think can be done to quell this unrest, especially when we're looking forward to the Friday elections?
Yes, security agencies and their relationship with the ruling government or the prime minister have always been a thorn in the skin of our democracy. Because most of the time, prime ministers have sought to abuse security agencies to torment the opponents in the political system. It may interest your viewers to recall that in the period between 2015 and now, the country has seen the assassination of two generals of the army, the commanders of the Lesotho Defense Force. 2 of them have been assassinated within the context of political instability. And one of them, the third, is now in prison, is incarcerated now. So you see that the Lesotho Defense Force in particular, before we talk about the police, the Lesotho Defense Force in particular has been a huge factor in the political system in Lesotho. If by now we have 2 generals that have been assassinated and 1 that is currently in prison, you can see that there is a problem. However, in this pre-election period, we can say that the environment is a bit calm. We haven't seen those persons of security interfering, because in the past, the history we've had is that you would see the army now beginning to interfere with the political contestation and interfering in favor of the one who is in power at a particular point in time. But presently, we must be fair to the country. Presently, there is some calm, there is some stability in the run-up to these elections. We have never really seen the police or the army prominently interfering with the free political process, which is a bit promising, but cannot guarantee that in the post-election we may not see instability. Perhaps that can be attributable to the fact that the current Prime Minister, Majoro, is not an active contestant in this election. So, unlike in the past, where the Prime Minister will be a contestant in this election, so in this election, the Prime Minister is not actively contesting. So, which is the position that has always disturbed us for the longest time, that when the Prime Minister is contesting, he will marshal the security agencies and use them against opponents. So perhaps it may be proper to put it in its context that now, in the run-up to this week's parliamentary elections, there is some relative stability, although the situation is still pretty much fragile. But it may be proper to give credit to the country that, unlike in the past, now there is some level of calm and stability.
All right. Dr. Paddy, let's come to you now and let's look at just one more thing. Do you think that Lesotho should be demilitarized? Do you think it should be demilitarized? What role does the military even play at this point? What's your thought?
A difficult question to say a country should not have a military, because all countries, at least the majority have the military, either police as a part of that, but soldiers also. But if the role of the military is to secure the borders, integrity of the borders of itself and its sovereignty, perhaps that changes the complexion of the question. If the military is to create a regional force, for instance, when there is a trouble in Mozambique, then that generates a different answer. So it really depends as to what will be the key issues that lead to saying Lesotho may have to demilitarize, because it contributed significantly its army in the peacekeeping efforts in Mozambique more recently. As far as the territorial integrity of the border of Lesotho, I don't think there is any major threat in relation to its neighbor South Africa. And if there were, there would be very little contestation around who would win aerially and on foot if there were such a threat. So, so I think the answer to that question has to be in the context of what kind of regional integration strategy that probably starts with the issues between Lesotho and South Africa is. Then, based on that, we may actually say, well, there might be reason for demilitarization.
All right, Hoolo, let me ask you this question. Now, as the 2022 national election draws closer, we hear that the nation, the Mountain Kingdom, has deployed a lot of people, observers, to come see what they are doing for the elections. And as a result, the EU has deployed its first and its biggest observer body or mission. So what do you have to say about that? Do you think that they will have enough success when it comes to observation of the elections in Lesotho?
Yes, I think the international community, particularly the donor community, your EUs, your US, your SADC, they have a peculiar interest in this election in particular. They have always had interest in elections in Lesotho, but in this election, they have a peculiar interest because they put in a lot of investment in the period between 2017, when this government, whose term is expiring now, started, up until now. They put huge resources into a project called the Reforms Project, huge resources. And the idea was that this election will be an election that is conducted on the basis of new legal framework, new constitutional framework, and in the broadest sense, within the reformed political system in Lesotho. So that was the presumption when they were mounting their interest in this election. Of course, like everyone else's hope, our hopes got shattered when the reforms program collapsed. So it will be interesting to see what their interest will be this time around, now that I am certain that their deployment of observers is pursuant to the deployment of resources they have put in that country in the period at least between 2017 and now. And even the follow-on programs that they have put in place, they were anticipating that after this election, the new government now will be running with the reforms program, now implementation of the reforms program. So there is that mismatch in terms of what the international donor community expects with this election and what actually transpires on the ground. So it is going to be extremely interesting because for the first time we see EU deploying this huge contingent to that election. EU has been one of the donors that sponsored the reforms program in Lesotho and continues to develop follow-on programs onto the reforms program. So it is hugely participating this time around. There are even rumors that it is even funding the Independent Electoral Commission. So EU, more than any other donor, is putting a lot of resources in Lesotho presently. It's even supporting, by the way, the country's national budget, annual budget. The annual budget is supported by the European Union, which is already a very problematic position. So it is clear why the EU has interest in this particular election. And obviously, it's not only EU, even the Southern African Development Community. Ever since the country was dogged by instability, there is no international body that has been present in Lesotho, physically, militarily, financially, and even diplomatically than Southern African Development Community. In fact, it has always been thought that the most legitimate intervention into Lesotho's political affairs is the one that is done by SADC, because it is done by an organization that is multilateral, where Lesotho is a member. So other donors have fallen a little bit in the shadow of SADC, trying to make sure that the process looks like, at least in the eyes of everyone else, it looks like a multilateral intervention. Whereas, of course, we know that interests differ there. The interest of South Africa, the interest of EU have always reigned supreme in this run-up to this election.
All right, Dr. Pali, let's start to bring things down as we look forward to wrap up this first half of the conversation. Very briefly, this Friday, the general elections will definitely take place. That's October 7 to elect 120 members of National Assembly and, of course, 33 members of the Senate. What could be the concern of every member of Lesotho, every citizen? What should be their concern?
Well, I think the elections have never been a problem in Lesotho, really, except in instances where, but the voters have always gone for voting, and they have been fairly peaceful. The problem is largely in the aftermath, in the inter-party battles that we have seen in Parliament, and one party toppling the other. So, but if you look at the celebratory mood of people going about their lives in the campaigns, I don't expect any unnecessary disruption around this, but it will always be in Parliament where you will see the horse trading that would bring about some level of instability. I must say that we must remind ourselves that in the next 2 years, Lesotho will be celebrating 200 years of its existence. And there is a lot of work that is being done in relation to that. I suppose that might bring sanity to think about what Lesotho should look like in the next 200 years. So those pillars that Mosugu, the founding father of the Lesotho nation, plowed as he built this nation, I think are the things that we have to focus on to make Lesotho a democracy that works. So far, with every election, there have been some reactions, but there have been not reactions among citizens, but rather reactions in the parliament, and where one party wants to have a coalition with the other and then topple the other. So it's that game that is very disrupting and disturbing. But at the level of the populace, there isn't much one can expect that may taint the election itself.
All right, it's been an eye-opening conversation surrounding the politics and security of the mountain kingdom, Lesotho. Many thanks to you, Hoolo Nyane, the head of Department Public and Environmental Law Department, and Dr. Pali Lehohla, the Director of Economic Modeling Academy, Research Associate at Oxford University. Thank you so much for your time joining us on this show to discuss Lesotho as a nation. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
And permit me to wrap up by saying Morong, Dr. Pali, and Morong.
And what could that mean?
It's good morning, I believe.
Morong is an Afrikaans thing of morning.
Morning.
Afrikaans is called more. And then morong.
Oh, I see.
Okay. Because they will say moloen, which is still morong, which is more. Now it's a sort of greet is hoto.
Dr. Pali, you've spoken much on the greetings. As we wrap up, Hoolo, you haven't said anything about the greetings.
Pardon?
Hoolo hasn't said anything about the greetings.
No, I think they've been captured well. The only thing one can add about Lesotho's greeting is that it doesn't have parts of the day, whether it is in the morning or whether it is in the evening or at night. We say Khotsong or Dumelang. If you see us sometimes confusing it in English and then we say good morning when it is in the afternoon. You must know that in our culture we don't distinguish between morning and in afternoon.
Interesting. Okay, seeing as I cannot pronounce any of that, and I do remember that Dr. Party said the greetings are centered around peace. I'll just say peace be unto you.
Peace be unto you.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. We still have two major talking points.
Even the Dumelang is agree that there is peace. So when you say Dumelang means agree.
So the greetings are centered around peace after all. All right, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we still have two major talking points. Joe Hanson, it's been a very insightful one. I mean, learning about the politics of a country and also the security. And it really has been a lot of growth for the Lesotho nation, seeing where they're coming from and where they are now.
A lot of points have been definitely highlighted by guests who did join us, talking about Dr. Paddy, giving us a little history, taking us way back to the expectations, especially for the general elections, which will hold this Friday. Everyone is indeed looking forward to that, and looking at the fact that the ABC is saying they're no longer in the political space, which we heard from Hoolo, how he broke that down as well for us, and then breaking it down to the point of the military. It cannot be demilitarized, if you put it that way, or it cannot be taken off, that the military needs to be in place to actually maintain peace and security. You do recall, one of the things that I looked forward to hear from them was the question concerning the capital, which is Maseru, is usually known to be very volatile. In 1998, you did have a riot that took place there, which was centered around peace and so on and so forth. After elections, results were not accepted. And then you also had another one in 2014, not forgetting to in 2021, specifically in May, where a woman was shot because of salary wages. I look forward to get answers to that question, if that capital is still seen as being volatile as they walk into another election period, especially for this Friday.
Yeah, I mean, even up until now, we hear that the reforms have been going back and forth. I mean, some few days ago, King Leslie was basically cajoled into making a decision, and even though he didn't have any constitutional power to do so. So yes, there have been a little bit of, trouble when it comes to the political and constitutional referendums. But anyways, like you said, we look forward to seeing how it unfolds. It has been an interesting 1 hour, and we still do have an insightful discussion as it pertains to the economy and the governance of Lesotho. Today is their independence, and as we look forward to the elections, we will be having this conversation. So do not go anywhere. This is Lesotho at 56.